Hey everybody, welcome back. It's patch 7.1, which means the new season has officially begun. To start the season off right, and to celebrate reaching 10,000 subscribers, I thought I'd put some extra effort into making this highly requested video a comprehensive guide to UDYR covering the basics of ability usage, item choices, and jungling. I am a 600,000 mastery point UDYR player. The main reason I enjoy playing so much UDYR is that there are so many different ways to play him. You can play as a high burst assassin, an off-tank DPS, or just a full tank stun machine. There's a surprising amount of information about a seemingly simple champion, so hopefully this video will break everything down in a way that is easy to digest, so you can find your own favorite way to play this champion. Let's get started. Let's first talk about abilities. UDYR does not have an ultimate ability, instead all 4 of his spells are available at level 1 and all have the same cooldown and mana cost. Every ability has a 6-second cooldown across all levels, and every ability starts at 47 mana cost at level 1, with the mana cost decreasing by 3 with each level up, so any level 5 ability only costs 35 mana. UDYR has this strange mechanic that is a global cooldown. After using any ability, the other abilities are put on a 2-second cooldown. Contrary to what almost all internet sources say that I've been able to find, this 2-second global cooldown is actually reduced by cooldown reduction. So with 0 CDR you can see the 2-second global cooldown timers after using any ability, and with 45% CDR you can see the global cooldown is just over 1 second. Each of UDYR's 4 abilities have 2 different components: a temporary effect and a persistent effect, which you keep until you switch to a different stance. Starting with Tiger Stance, the Q ability, there are actually 3 parts to Tiger Stance. First off, after activating Tiger, your first basic attack will burn your target over the next 2 seconds, and this damage scales strongly with AD. So if you max Tiger and you have a lot of AD, the first attack will do huge damage, but it only does a lot of damage if you have AD. The second effect of Tiger Stance is that it gives increased attack speed for 5 seconds. This effect is mostly useful if you're maxing Phoenix Stance, because you can take 1 early level in Q for the attack speed bonus and activate that before switching to Phoenix for more Phoenix Stance DPS. The third effect of Tiger Stance, the persistent effect, is that each basic attack does extra damage, which also scales with AD. If you are attacking a dragon or turret, you should use Tiger Stance mostly because it makes each basic attack do a little bit more damage. One more small tip about Tiger Stance: the buffed first attack does not expire with time, so if you're jungling and starting level 1 Tiger Stance, you can activate 1 Q early in order to buff your first attack with the burn damage, and then you'll have another burn ready to be used so you can chain them back to back. Next up, let's jump to Phoenix Stance, the R ability, before talking about Turtle and Bear Stance. Tiger and Phoenix are the only damage abilities, so you should always either be maxing Tiger or Phoenix first. You can also think of these 2 spells as opposites of each other in a way. While Tiger Stance excels in burst damage, Phoenix Stance excels at DPS. And while Tiger has a stronger early game with better ganks, Phoenix has a stronger late game with better teamfights. The temporary effect of Phoenix Stance is just a small area of effect burn around UDYR that works just like the passive on Cinderhulk or Sunfire Cape. It doesn't do very much damage, but in some cases it can be useful, like if you're chasing somebody but you can't quite get into auto attack range, then maybe you can kill them with your area effect. But most of the damage of Phoenix Stance comes from the persistent effect, the flames. Every 3rd basic attack causes flames to shoot out in a cone in whatever direction you are facing, and these flames do a large amount of damage even without building any AP, because their base damage is so high, especially when maxed. This means you can do better DPS by building attack speed, not ability power. If you do build AP instead of attack speed, your burst damage would increase, but your DPS would go down. Still, the burst damage of AP Phoenix does not compete with the burst damage of AD Tiger. So that's the damage abilities out of the way. Now let's talk about Turtle Stance. The temporary effect is a shield that lasts for 5 seconds. The shield size does scale with AP, but if you want to get the most out of your shields, the important stats to get would be cooldown reduction, armor, and magic resist. Your armor and magic resist stats are applied to your shield health, so if you're at maximum CDR with a 3.5 second shield cooldown, gaining 200 health every time you use it, You can think of your armor and magic resist as multiplying the effective health. And then the persistent effect of Turtle Stance is just that you get lifesteal. 10% lifesteal at level 1 up to 18% lifesteal when maxed. Now for the last ability, Bear Stance. The temporary effect of Bear Stance is increased movement speed for a few seconds and the ability to walk through units and avoid the oh so painful minion block. The move speed bonus and the move speed duration scales with the ability level. The persistent effect of Bear Stance is that any target you attack gets stunned for 1 second. Like all persistent effects, this effect does not expire, so you can stun as many different targets as you want before switching off to a different stance. You just can't stun the same target twice within 5 seconds, so after stunning somebody you can see a timer around their feet telling you when they can be stunned again. This is the spell you should always use to start ganks and team fights. Now let's talk about UDYR's passive. It seems simple enough, but there's a bit of planning that goes into optimizing it. UDYR gains increased movement speed and attack speed whenever he uses an ability, so you run faster and attack faster. This effect stacks up to 3 times, but if 5 seconds pass without using an ability, you lose all your stacks. And since the base cooldown of each spell is 6 seconds, which is longer than 5 seconds, this means that if you want to keep your passive fully stacked for the fastest possible jungle clear, you can't do it with just 1 spell. You need to use 2 spells until you get enough cooldown reduction, but I'll talk about that more later. So for the first jungle clear, or any other time you have blue buff and can afford to spend a lot of mana, you should stack up your passive by alternating between your damage spell and Turtle Stance. If you are using Phoenix Stance, it's most efficient to let 1 full flame cycle complete before switching to Turtle Stance. In other words, attack 4 times in Phoenix Stance. This will give you 2 instances of flames, and then you can instantly switch to Turtle Stance and not waste any extra attacks in Phoenix when you can instead be in Turtle. It is possible to keep your passive fully stacked with a single spell, but only if you have 18% cooldown reduction or more. When you have 18% CDR, your abilities all have a 4.92 second cooldown, which is less than 5 seconds. There are only 2 situations though that I can think of when this is relevant. The first situation is if you're attacking a tower and you just want to kill it as fast as possible, then you can keep your passive fully stacked just by spamming only Q, and then you don't have to switch off of Q because you do more damage in Q. Second situation, if you're running a long distance and trying to get there as fast as possible, then you can just spam Bear Stance. So now that you have a general understanding of ability usage, let's talk about different playstyles and builds. I made this table to sum up pretty much every way you can possibly want to play UDYR. Whether you're going for DPS, burst, or full tank, it's possible to do any of those with either Tiger or Phoenix. Of course, they would all require a different combination of items to work. The asterisks indicate which stance I think works better for each playstyle. So if you're going for burst damage, maxing Tiger would be better, but if you're going for DPS or tank, maxing Phoenix would be better. But this is my own opinion, and I encourage you to experiment on your own. As a rule of thumb, you should usually start with 1 or 2 offensive items in the early game before starting defensive items. With early damage, you can try to get some early kills, and then later you can build armor or magic resist based on whoever gets fed on the enemy team. In general, if you get fed early, you can build more damage items, but if you are behind, you should only build defensive items. So as a starting point for you, I'll give you an example build for each of these 3 playstyles: burst, DPS, and tank. For the first example build, maximum burst damage Tiger Stance. First item Warrior, second item Ravenous Hydra. Runes are all attack damage, reds and quintessences, and masteries Thunderlords for the burst damage. Next example build, DPS Phoenix Stance. First item Blood Razor, second item Trinity Force, all attack speed, reds and quintessences. Keystone Mastery, Fervor of Battle. And for the last example build, Tank Phoenix. First item Wit's End, second item Cinderhulk. Runes will be all attack speed, reds and quintessences, and masteries Courage of the Colossus. But if you want more information on specific builds, chances are I've made a build video that will help you with the details. Just take a look through my uploads. Most of my videos in the past year are actually UDYR build guides. Now let's move on to jungling. For the first clear, I'd recommend always starting at blue buff. This will give you enough mana regen to keep your passive fully stacked for the entire first clear, and then if you take red at the end of your clear, it will last for a longer duration in your ganking period. Phoenix Stance has better clear speed than Tiger Stance, so if you're playing Tiger Stance, don't try to clear the entire jungle. For the first clear with Tiger Stance, you should just go from blue to wolves to red to get level 3, and then try to either gank or invade to make use of your natural early strength with Tiger Stance. But if you're playing Phoenix, you could farm Raptors and Krugs early before ganking because your clear speed is so good, and you get a lot of experience from those, especially Raptors. And Phoenix does well late game, so farming is a good investment of your time, unlike with Tiger Stance where you would rather be aggressive and have the game end early. After your first clear, you have two options. The first option is to gank an enemy that is pushed. Since UDYR does not have a gap close ability, when ganking you need to take long routes around the back of the enemy, or else they'll just be able to walk away when they see you and you won't be able to catch them. The other option, if there are no pushed enemies, is to invade the enemy jungle. You can steal something, or try to catch the enemy jungle by surprise and kill them. You could also leave a deep ward in a high traffic area of the jungle, so you can see when the enemy enters this section of the jungle. Deep wards can help you predict ganks and then counter gank and go for a kill or two. UDYR can solo Dragon early in the game, around level 5 after your first recall. Maxing Tiger Stance will give you an easier Dragon solo compared to Phoenix Stance. To solo Dragon, just alternate your damage spell with Turtle Stance, like regular jungle farming, and it helps to have either blue buff or a Hunter's Potion for the mana regen, so you can alternate these spells for the entire fight. You can also solo Rift Herald fairly easily after the 15-minute mark with Tiger Stance, but if you're maxing Phoenix, you usually need to have a damage item like Trinity Force or Gwynsu's Rage Blade to solo Rift Herald. The Rift Herald buff helps you with split pushing more than anything else, so it's important to take that buff whenever you're able to. Lots of times I prefer to just solo Rift Herald so I don't draw attention from the enemy mid or top. In team fights, the strategy depends on your build. So if you're playing a damage build, you should try to flank and get to enemy squishes on the back line, whether it's an AD carry, a mid laner, or a support. You want to try to flank and pick them off. You don't want to charge into the middle of a 5 versus 5 if you're squishy. You have to play smart and use stealth to your advantage. It's important to try to dodge skill shots, especially hard CC like a Lux Snare or Nautilus Hook. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're playing full tank, you instead want to be in the middle of the action. You should frontline for your team, be the main engager, and peel for your squishies. If the enemies have a very fed carry, you can try to lock them down, but if your team has a very fed carry, you should do everything you can to protect them. This means following your carry around, stunning everybody that gets close, and standing in the way of skill shots. So what can you do if your team is behind and can't win a 5 versus 5? Well, if you're strong enough, you can try to split push. The best time to split is when you're able to 1 versus 1 anybody on the enemy team. This would force the enemies to send 2 people to stop you, because if they just send 1, you will kill them and a tower too. If you're in lower ranks, 5 versus 5s are complete chaos. Everybody has tunnel vision, and everybody just fights until everybody dies. In games like this, I think split pushing is especially strong, because it takes a while for people to notice usually. The strategy that's worked the best for me is to get top or bot lane to slow push, and then activate Oracle Alteration as you enter the enemy jungle. Hide in a bush somewhere near the lane with your minions pushing. If an enemy does go to clear it, you can try to flank and kill them, but otherwise wait for a fight to break out somewhere. And then while chaos is erupting, jump out of your hiding spot and push the lane. Use Phoenix Stance to quickly kill minions, and use Tiger Stance while attacking towers. It helps to have an attack speed item like Trinity Force or Rage Blade for the fastest tower takedowns. Also, if you have maximum cooldown reduction and an armor item, you can try soloing a tower without minions by quickly alternating Tiger and Turtle Stance. And that's about all the tips I can think of for now. So hopefully this video helped. Hopefully you'll be able to steal some ranked points from some noobs. Leave a like if you learned something. Leave a comment if you have any questions, or if you want any more detail on anything, or if you have any suggestions for future videos. Remember to subscribe if you're interested in seeing more videos like this. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.